Noon study group. We're studying the book of Deuteronomy, Moshe's speech to the Jewish people, his final speech to the Jewish people, in which he gives his mission statement for us for all of eternity. And it is from the book of Deuteronomy that we truly grasp and understand our role as the chosen people, what it means, and what does God expect of us, what does the world expect of us, and what should we expect from ourselves. I'd like to thank today the sponsors for today's class, Yuval and Cheryl Schusterman. They're sponsoring in honor of their grandson's first birthday, Itai Ron. Happy birthday, Itai Ron. You should only have nachas from them, from your grandson, from all of your entire family. Yuval and Cheryl, thank you very much. If anyone would like to sponsor classes, any of the upcoming classes, you just go to chabadconejo.com/sponsor. And you can pick whichever week you'd like to sponsor on the dedication in whose honor or memory it may be. We have been studying the Shema, the prayer of the Shema, which comes from the book of Deuteronomy. And in the second to the last sentence of the first paragraph, and it's repeated in the second paragraph, we have the mitzvah of Tefillin. I remember this story back in the days when immigration from the Soviet Union was quite difficult, and there was this Russian teenager that managed to get one of those lucky tickets to be able to get out of the Soviet Union and make his way to America. Anyway, he came to America and he heard, the Rebbe talk about the importance of putting on tefillin with their fellow Jew. And he wanted very much to participate in this outreach of being able to get other Jews to put on tefillin. He didn't speak any English, but he very much wanted to participate. For those mentioning that the volume is low, is it better now? If someone could put up on the chat if the volume is fine. I'm not sure what the issue may be. Maybe I'm just sitting too far away. Joanne, I could see you. Joanna from Poland, volume is fine. There you go. Thank you, Joanna. If it's fine in where you, Poland, Joanna? If it's fine there, then it's fine anywhere in the world. Anyway, so this Russian boy is on a subway in New York. He has his pair of tefillin with him, and he sees someone that clearly looks like a Jew. So he goes over to him and he's trying to motion him to put on tefillin. Again, he doesn't speak any English. And he's all frustrated because he can't communicate with this fellow, but he wants to participate in this outreach work that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was talking so much about, the idea of putting on tefillin with a fellow Jew. And in total frustration, he says this. He says, I Jew, you Jew. That much he knew. Gets the fellow's attention. The fellow nods his head, yes, yes. And then he says, I tefillin, you tefillin. And with that, the fellow rolled up his sleeve and allowed our new Russian immigrant to have the honor of putting on tefillin with him. Sometimes it's not the debate and it's not the philosophy, it's a soul-to-soul communication of I Jew, you Jew, I tefillin, you tefillin. I want to share a story with you about Rabbi Biederman. I knew Rabbi Biederman from my days in sleepaway camp in the 70s. Well, in 1981, he and his Rebbetzin, his wife, were sent on shlichus to be an emissary of the Rebbe to Vienna. That was their post. And Austria was put under his domain, his responsibility. And he immediately started serving the local Jewish community with adult education programs for children. He was very much aware that in Vienna there lived the famous Dr. Victor Frankel. But Frankl did not have any connection really with the Jewish community. And Biederman and Frankl never really made their acquaintance, at least not in the early years. That's why he was so surprised when sometime he received an envelope in the mail from Dr. Victor Frankel, and it was a contribution. And he said, I want to make an annual contribution to your Chabad center, and every year I will send in my contribution. And he would send back a nice letter, a thank you letter. He never quite understood how the relationship began, but he was just very happy, obviously, to receive the support, but also to receive it from the Dr. Victor Frankel. But that changed in 1995. 1995, he began to understand more clearly the connection. In 1995, he received a visit from an 85-year-old woman. Her name was Marguerite Chavez. And Marguerite says to Rabbi Biderman, I know you think that you are the first Chabad emissary to Vienna. You came here in 1981 and no one else was here before you, so you think you're the first. But I want to tell you that I was the first, she says. I was actually sent here by the Lubavitcher Rebbe on a particular mission. And then she shared with Rabbi Biderman what her maiden name was. Her maiden name was Hager. The Hager is not an ordinary Jewish family name. The Hager comes from the famed Vizhnitz Hasidic dynasty, which means her family were from the Rebbes of the Vizhnitz Hasidic dynasty. And she went on telling Rabbi Biderman her story. She was born in Chernowitz. She spent her childhood in Vienna. Her family were not as religious as the other parts of the family. She became an opera singer. She married and she had a daughter. A few days before World War II, friends helped her escape together with her husband and daughter. They ran to Italy, and from there they made it on one of the last boats to the United States. And they settled in Detroit, Michigan. Unfortunately, the rest of her family remained behind, and no one survived from her immediate family. Years passed. Marguerite's daughter grew up. She got married. She married a doctor who in 1959 was honored at a Chabad institution, some Chabad center in the East Coast. And this doctor was their honoree. And in conjunction with that occasion, her family, the doctor's wife, and the mother, Marguerite, who's telling this story, had an audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So this audience is taking place in 1959. And Marguerite says to Rabbi Biderman, I came into the Rebbe's room. First the Rebbe addressed the banquet, the gala, the honorees. And then the Rebbe focused his attention on me. Knew the family name, knew that it was Hager, knew the dynasty from which I came. And as the Rebbe began talking to me, this strange emotion came over me. I just began to cry. I cried like I haven't cried in decades. For many Holocaust survivors, they shut down the emotion of tears because they were afraid that the moment they would cry, they would never be able to stop. And so they lost so much, that there was so much to mourn for, that they were afraid to begin the process of mourning. But she said right there at that moment in that room, I felt the ability to cry and to let it all out. And she said, I walked out of that room feeling that I had now a second father, that someone that cared for me, that watched over me, that knew about my life. In this audience, she mentioned to the Rebbe that she would love so much at some point in her life to go back to Vienna and to visit, that she hadn't been to Vienna since the end of the war, and she would want to make such a trip. And the Rebbe encouraged it and said, it would be a good thing for you to do, but I'm going to ask for a favor. If you do go to Vienna, let my office know before. And I'd like to then set up a second audience with us because I have some personal favors to ask of you. But only if you decide to go. Indeed, a few months later, the opportunity came, says Marguerite to Rabbi Biderman, for me to make this trip. I contacted the Rebbe's office. They set up the appointment. The Rebbe says to me, I'd like to send you on 2 personal errands. Represent me. 2 things that I need you to do for me personally in Vienna. And she told Rabbi Biderman one of them. She didn't share the second one, but she told them one of them. The Rebbe wanted me to go and find someone named, this is 1959, so the name wasn't known. I want you to find someone named Dr. Victor Frankel. If you go to the Vienna, there's a particular clinic that the Rebbe told her, and you go to the Department of Neurology, that's where you'll find him. And this is the message I want you to give him. Tell Dr. Frankl that I send my regards and that I said that he should be strong, that he should continue his work, that he should have strong resolve, and no matter what, he shouldn't give up. And if he remains strong and committed to his beliefs, he'll certainly prevail. Okay. I make my way in Vienna to the clinic. I go there and I ask to speak to Professor Victor Frankel. They tell me that he hasn't been to work in the last 2 weeks. And we don't know when he's coming back. And so I was a bit creative. I somehow found my way to getting his home address. I made my way to the home. I knock on the door. It was opened by a woman. The first thing I remember when she opened the door was I thought I have the wrong address. Because the first thing I saw was a cross hanging on the wall. For those that know the story of Dr. Victor Frankel, in 1947, he married his second wife, Eleanor Schwind, who was a devout Catholic, and he remained married to her the rest of his life. So I was a bit taken aback. I said, "Is this the home of Dr. Victor Frankel?" The woman said, "Yes, it is." She says, "Well, I have regards and a message for him from a rabbi in New York." She says, "Let me get him." Minutes later, this slightly annoyed-looking Dr. Frankel appears. And Marguerite says, "I told him I have regards for you, from Rabbi Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe from Brooklyn, New York." And he sent a message. Remain strong, continue your work, complete resolve, don't give up, you will prevail. This doctor suddenly became transformed before my eyes, from being uninterested to being very interested. And tears began to fill his eyes. And he thanked Marguerite for this message. And he informed her, he explained to her for the emotion. He said he was planning to abandon his career in psychology. He was planning on giving it up and leaving Vienna. Why? Because at that time in Vienna, he was so opposed in his beliefs, in his therapeutic beliefs. You see, Frankl grew up, he was a young colleague of Sigmund Freud. He also was friends with Alfred Adler. But his beliefs challenged their teachings. You see, the dominant view at the time was that people are driven by the need to gratify physical needs, a will to pleasure. And Frankl started this new philosophy, seeing humankind very differently. In Frankl's view, we're unique beings because we're driven by a will to meaning, not pleasure. That meaning, there being meaning and purpose in life, is far more powerful to us than gratification, satisfaction, and pleasure. And possessing free choice and the capacity for self-transcendence allows us to find meaning in life. That was the philosophy he began to develop before the war, and then during the time in the Nazi death camps, and we've spoken about his writings during the concentration camps a great deal, is when he really saw that if you have meaning and purpose in life, you can survive everything. After the Holocaust, this is what he threw himself into, and he found himself the lone dissenter, where he was put down very strongly by all other great philosophers and psychologists of the time. He was taunted, his lectures were shunned, and he experienced tremendous depression and emotional turmoil. He couldn't get his message through. The pressure was so great that he decided to give up. And he was going to move to Australia. His sister lived there. And his sister said, I have work for you over here. You can have a job over here. You can start a new life over here. And just when Marguerite knocks on his door, he's filling out his immigration papers to move to Australia. And here comes this total stranger who says, there's a rabbi in Brooklyn. He's known as the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's a holy man. And he sent me here as his emissary to give you a message. Don't give up. You will prevail. Be strong. What you're thinking, what you believe in is correct. It is the right philosophy. And you need to be the vehicle to spread this to the world. And instead of joining his sister in Australia, he continued his practice as a psychiatrist. He went back to work at the clinic with renewed motivation. And the rest, as we know, is history. As his book has become one of the best sellers in the world, and his philosophy has been embraced now by old world philosophers. So now Rabbi Biderman understands that there is a connection with Victor Frankel and Chabad. So he calls him up and he says, do you remember a woman named Marguerite Chavez that came to see you in 1959? He says, of course I remember. How can I not remember? I remember that was the great turning point in my life. And thus began this friendship for the last year of his life between Rabbi Biderman and Victor Frankel. What was not known, and the reason why I'm telling this story, was that Dr. Victor Frankel, even before this visit from Margarita Chavez, till the very end of his life, put on tefillin every single day. Even after he marries a Catholic woman and lives with a Catholic woman his entire life, most of his life, he never missed a day of putting on tefillin. It was published in his only authorized biography of his life, that every day he would go into a room, he would put on these straps, these boxes called tefillin, he would say the prayers, he would pray the Shema, he would read from the book of Tehillim, take it off, and go back to doing his job. Frankel's non-Jewish son-in-law confirmed this by saying, I found his quote, my father-in-law would close himself off in a room every day for a little while. He writes, once I opened the door and I saw him with the black boxes on his head and his hand, and he was annoyed by me for intruding on this special privacy that he granted himself every single day. When he was taken to the hospital towards the end of his life, this practice of putting on tefillin became public because he insisted on putting on tefillin in the hospital every single day. Interesting. That even for someone like him, as secular as he was, he knew that there is within him the soul. And he knew that the tefillin was a way for him to connect his soul to his Creator. You know, when we study about a mitzvah like tefillin and mezuzah and any of the commandments and rituals that we have studied together and will study together, it's very important that you don't view them as once upon a time. There used to be. Our grandfathers used to do this. Torah is a modern book as much as it's an ancient book. Torah is talking to us today as much as it spoke to our ancestors. I've shared this numerous times, but I always remember it. When I first came out, I was pretty young when I first came out. I came out in 1983 to take over as the Chabad rabbi of the Conejo. And at the time, Temple Adat Elohim in Thousand Oaks also hired a new rabbi the same month that I came out. Any one of you remember Alan Greenbaum. And Alan and I became very good friends. We became very close friends. And Alan, if somehow you end up listening to this, I believe you live in Eretz Yisrael now, so I miss you and my regards to you. So Alan asked me to come speak to his Hebrew school kids, to the Hebrew school kids in Adar Elokim, and I accepted the invitation. And I still remember Alan's introduction. He introduces me as the two of us have formed a close bond, a unique friendship between the two of us, one a Reform rabbi, one a Chabad rabbi, and yet we found a way to really become brothers. And then he adds this P.S. in this introduction. He says to the students, remember we studied in Hebrew school about the ancient Hebrews putting on those black boxes on their arm and on their head. And he points to me, he says, well, he still does that. So I remember getting to the podium, and the first thing is I thanked Alan for making me a museum showcase. You put me behind this glass wall as if you're going in a museum somewhere of, look, there's that ancient ritual guy there. And I explained to the kids that tefillin do not belong in the museum. And I'm not the only one that still puts on those boxes. And that they shouldn't just study about it, but they should study how to actually put them on. Because it's as meaningful to us today as it's been for Moses at Sinai. You see, we're not museum exhibits. We're living Jews. I love the name of the march that takes place every year, the March of the Living. You take all these teenagers and they bring them to the concentration camps and to Auschwitz. And instead of it being the March of the Death, they call it the March of the Living. Because it's about survival. It's not just about death. It's look how far we've come from where the world put us, but we refuse to just become ashes. We refuse to just become a museum. We are a living people. We are alive and well. Israel is thriving today. March of the living. We're a vibrant people. We're an active people. We're a significant people. We're a proud people. Am Yisrael Chai is not just a song, and it's not just a slogan for a banner. And it doesn't just mean security. Am Yisrael Chai in all of its meaning is we are alive. We're vibrant. Not just the Orthodox and the religious. We as a Jewish people are a vibrant force in this world. And so the mitzvot are just as vibrant as we are. They're just as alive today, if not more today than ever before. Now, for some it may be difficult if you're listening to me and you haven't been raised with this, and you hear about different mitzvot and this mitzvah and that mitzvah, and it may be difficult to take this all on. And the answer is you don't take it all on at one time. You start somewhere. You pick something. So whether you're going to be inspired today about the mitzvah of tefillin, or you're going to be inspired next week, we're going to talk about the mitzvah of mezuzah, or any of the mitzvah we talk about, or you've heard about the mikvah, or sending your children to a Jewish school, to a Hebrew school, to a day school. You start somewhere. You pick something. You don't take it all on at once. You know, just like if someone starts getting up there in years and suddenly they see their waistline begins to grow. It's like, hey, where did you come from? When I got married, I weighed 140. I was pretty skinny at the time. And all of a sudden, it's like, hey, I'm eating the same Pringles and Mountain Dew I used to, and suddenly it doesn't leave, it stays. And so you go to a trainer and you say, hey, what's going on? I feel like the waist is growing. And they tell you got to start working out. Well, if you haven't worked out in years and you start working out, you can't run the marathon on day one. You got to take it slow. You know, you start with maybe walking first, and then a little bit of a jog, and then some other exercises, and you got to give up some of the junk food. But pretty soon you can find yourself in shape. Well, the same thing is in Judaism. If you take it all on at once, you won't be able to make it. So you start. You pick a mitzvah. You pick something. And you work out. And it becomes easier and easier. Mitzvah goreret mitzvah. One mitzvah will lead to the next mitzvah. And so I encourage you to pick that mitzvah and pursue it. And if you need some assistance, you can call me. You can email me. But let's start loosening up. Let's start working out together. physically, yes, and spiritually as well. So if you need a mezuzah for your door, if it's time to put that mezuzah up, not just on the front door of your home, but perhaps the rest of your home, give us a call and we'll set up an appointment for a rabbi to come over to your home. For those of you listening in Poland, it will be a little bit difficult to get to your home. But if you live somewhere in the United States or many countries in the world, we'll find an emissary that can help you with it. And as we're talking about the mitzvah of tefillin, I'd like to present those of you listening, and someone asked if women put on tefillin. They do not, and we'll talk about that. I don't know if we'll get to it today or next week, but we'll discuss it. But if you are a male over the age of 13, and you're inspired by any of the words that we talk about the mitzvah of tefillin this week or next week or last week, and you're interested, and you want to put on tefillin every day, but you know the price tag is a bit high and you can't afford it, it's not in your budget right now, I have a sponsor, someone who is willing to buy you that pair of tefillin anonymously. He'll just get the address through me, and tefillin will come to you, and we'll help you teach you how to put them on. He only asks one thing in return, that you take it seriously and that you put it on every day. It'll take you a few minutes to put on. But he's willing, as his way of expanding the value of the mitzvah of tefillin, he's willing to go ahead and be that sponsor for you. So again, you don't have to raise your hand right now. Send me an email, rabbi@chabadconejo.com, and tell me that you'd like to take advantage of this generous individual's offer to all of you to buy a pair of tefillin for those that do not have one, are interested in putting it on, and can't afford it. I don't know if you've seen this clip that's been going around social media this week. It's on Facebook and Instagram and emails, and it just made it, those things that just go viral, and it's not recorded professionally, just someone happened to have a phone there, but it was this great clip, and you'll find it. I'm sure you'll get it 27 times over the next few days. It's taking place in Israel, and there's this Chabad a teenager, yeshiva boy, behind the table. And he's putting on tefillin with passerbyers. So I don't know if it's an outdoor of a shopping center. I'm not exactly sure where the scene is. But he's got a table over there with some literature, and he's got a pair of tefillin. He's a youngster, young kid, yeshiva boy. Got the black jacket on. He's got the black hat on, the white shirt on. And as people are coming by, excuse me, put on tefillin. He's doing it in Hebrew, asking people to put on tefillin. So there's one teenager in good shape, a good shape looking teenager, Israeli, clearly secular, no kippah. He's walking by the table, and this Chabad yeshiva boy does his shtick, stops the teenager, you want to put on tefillin. He's a bit annoyed by it, but he's got this element of chutzpah to him, this teenager, so he says to the yeshiva boy, you know what, I'll make a deal with you. Here's the deal. And he points to these poles that were nearby, these metal poles that are there, bars that are high up. And he says, if you could do more chin-ups than me, I'll put on tefillin with you. Now that gets the excitement of other passerbyers, so everyone's taking out their cell phones for the great challenge. And the yeshiva boy has got nothing to lose. It's not as if, and if he doesn't, he has to do anything. So he says, Lama lo, why not? Sure, you're on. Okay, now a crowd begins to crowd around here. This poor yeshiva kid who probably hasn't worked out a day in his life, and this guy that seemingly is on his jog in his his gym suit there, and the yeshiva boy says, you're on. And the kid, the secular teenager, jumps up to the bar one, and it's high up, so you can tell each one is a tremendous amount of effort. And the crowd now is counting it down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm watching this, and I say, this poor yeshiva kid, he doesn't know. He probably doesn't know what a chin-up is. This guy is in for it, and he's going to be humiliated now. It's going to go on social media. Anyway, the secular teenager reaches the number 13, and he can't do anymore. Again, it was high up. So each one was a nice schlep up, and he jumps down, and he says to the yeshiva kid, okay, the number is 13. Let's see you beat it, laughing. The yeshiva boy is still putting on tefillin with someone else. So he's saying, yeah, okay, don't worry, 1 minute. He finishes putting on tefillin with someone, puts the tefillin down on the table, has his hat and his jacket's still on, jumps up onto the bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. He knocks off 20 of them. The crowd is screaming. And it was just a riot. And then, of course, he jumps down and says, all right, roll up your sleeve. We're going to do it now. It's just all over the world these things take place. You got to be proud of these Hasidim of the Lubavitcher Rebbe that go wherever they go with their tefillin, whether it's in the airplane, they're going to bother you, on the street corners of Manhattan, they're going to bother you. But they're doing what the Rebbe taught them is important for your soul, to connect your soul to the tefillin and thereby connect your soul directly with God. You see, life is like an escalator, not the way you may think. It's not the escalator that you get to the bottom step, it just takes you from one place to the next. Life is like an escalator, only the escalator is going down and you're on the bottom trying to go up. If we merely stand still, then we're going to go down. If we just put in a little effort, you may stay in the same position. Only if you exert yourself a little bit, push yourself a little bit, that's how you move up. And we each have to find that way to push ourselves a little bit more. There's a story that I've read in a book written by Rabbi Yisrael Spiro. He was known as the Bluzhever Rebbe. If you haven't read his book, you should get it. The Bluzhever Rebbe wrote a book called Hasidic Stories of the Holocaust. It's a powerful book of inspirational and sad stories, but they each have a very powerful message. And this particular story takes place in a concentration camp. The Nazis, Yamach Shemam, didn't just want to kill the Jews, but they wanted very much to humiliate them as much as possible. So in the middle of the night, they burst into the barracks and they ordered everyone out into the field, into this big open field. The Bluzhever Rebbe, Rabbi Yisrael Shapiro, was one of the fellows that were in the barracks at the time. And they ordered everyone to run to a nearby open field. They were tired, they were beaten, they were exhausted. They arrive at the field and they find this huge, freshly dug pit forming this wide valley. So just imagine this field with a wide valley dug out. And the voice of this Nazi animal commander makes it clear what this is all about. He says, if you dogs value your life, you must jump from one side of the pit to the other. You got to make a leap from one side of the pit to the other side of the pit. If you make it to the other side in your jump, go back to the barracks, go back to sleep. But if you don't make it and you fall into the valley, so to say, you'll be shot immediately and this will be your grave. And he has all these other Nazis there for entertainment value, laughing to see these beaten up Jews try to make the jump. And of course, you keep hearing the sound of the guns going off for the most of them that couldn't make the leap. These Jews have already turned into skeletons. So there was little chance of them making it. The Bluzhever Rebbe writes, Rabbi Yisrael Spiro writes, that he was friends with everyone in the concentration camps, secular Jews, religious Jews. And he finds himself on this line of death next to a secular Jew. And the secular Jew says, Rebbe, let's not jump. Let's not give them the satisfaction, the joy, the laughter that they're so after. When we get to our turn, let's just sit down and slide into the pit and call it a day. And we'll wake up, we'll be in the heavenly world, and we'll meet the rest of our family. Why give them the satisfaction of the entertainment? And the Rebbe says to him, I understand where you're coming from, and it's tempting, but so long as we're alive, our duty, our job is to fight for life. We'll make an attempt. We don't make it, you're right. We'll be in the heavenly world within a few minutes, and we'll be with the rest of our families. But so long as we're here, our job is to jump. So we'll jump. And we don't make it, we don't make it. It came time, their turn on line. The Rebbe was first, and the secular Jew was behind him. The Rebbe closes his eyes. The Bluzhever Rebbe closes his eyes and yells out, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And when he opened his eyes, he was on the other side of the pit. He made it. A few minutes later, a few seconds later, his friend online is also on the other side of the pit. They both made it. So the secular Jew says to the older rabbi, Rabbi, I don't understand. How did you make it? How did you do it? How were you able to jump from one side to the other side? So he said to him, when I got to my turn to jump, I closed my eyes, I said the Shema, and then I saw my father of blessed memory stretch out his hand from the heavenly world and yelled to me, hold on to my hand. Holding my father's hand was my grandfather. Holding his hand was his father. And there was this stretch of generations holding on to each other for me to grab onto their hand. I grabbed my father's hand, and the next thing I know, I woke up on the other side. And you, my friend, how did you make it over? The Rebbe asks him. To which he says, Rabbi Spira, I was holding on to you. That's how I made it to the other side. In Judaism, we all hold on to each other. We're all at different levels of observance, every one of us by no fault of our own and by no credit of our own. This is the way we were raised, this is the family we were brought into, but this is all designed by God. The one thing that we all have in common is that we all need to climb, that we all need to jump, we all need to leap. And for that we need assistance, because jumping is not always easy. Taking on something new is not always easy. Change of the status quo is not always easy, but staying in the status quo is not living. And so we have to always take that leap. And it works best if we hold on to each other like a Jewish community can. If we support one another, if we inspire one another, if we teach one another, so that you're not living a Jewish life in isolation, but you live it with others. You know, I feel, and I'm sure many of you feel, one of the real tragedies of this pandemic, aside for all the illness and aside for all the death, is the fact that it took us away from each other. Now, thank God for Zoom that we can communicate, we can teach, we can talk, but at the same time, there's still something that's lacking, and that's the feeling of being together, to support one another eye to eye, hand to hand, to really be one with one another. And as great as a job as Zoom and YouTube can possibly do, and Facebook and Instagram, it's still missing something when we're not together in one room. And so I hope and I pray that indeed, as we see the numbers begin to decline and more states start getting out of the mask mandates and all the other mandates, that hopefully very soon we can go back to being together. And those of you that have still been afraid to come back to shul will feel that confidence of coming back to shul. And we can have our Wednesday afternoon study group together and enjoy lunch together after class is over. If anyone is interested, this Monday night, for those that are women, we're having a paint night in person, paint night this Monday night at 7:30, where you'll get a canvas of your own and an instructor will teach you how to make a beautiful canvas drawing of your own for the upcoming holiday of Purim. That's this Monday night at 7:30. If you're interested, its space is limited because we're going to keep it spaced. You have to go on jewishacademy.com, go today, because it'll probably be filled if you wait any longer. Sign up for in-person this Monday night at 7:30. We look forward to seeing you all there. Tefillin, let's get back there. What is it? I would look at it this way. When one truly loves someone, right? If there's a loving relationship between two people, then every second that they're together is precious, and every moment apart leaves one with a sense of longing. When two people love one another and one has a memento, let's say a ring, a pin given to them by this other person, you cherish it, right? Why does the diamond ring mean so much? It's not just that it's a diamond, but who gave it to you? So if you have that ring or that pin or that piece of jewelry or whatever it may be, that momentum that someone that you truly love gave to you, when you look at it, when you touch it, when you see it, when you feel that connection of the one that gave it to you. Tefillin is the ring from God. It's the ring that God gave us, given to us as a sign of endearment. And that's why it's so precious in our eyes. When we put them on, what we're doing is we're sensing the closeness, the bond between man and God. In our tefillin, it's written about the greatness of God, how great God is. That's what it says in the parchments that's inside our boxes. It talks about the unity of God. It talks about the exodus of Egypt. There is a statement in our prayers that King David writes, Magid Devorov Yaakov, which means that God gives over his commandments to Jacob. But by saying his commandments, it means that God in some type of way keep these commandments as well. So that figuratively speaking, there is a pair of tefillin that God puts on as well. So the question is asked, what's written in God's tefillin? And the answer is, in God's tefillin it says how great and wonderful the Jewish people are. Our tefillin say how great God is. God's tefillin says how great we are. So both we and God are strengthened. Our bond is strengthened. Our feelings for one another are strengthened when we put on tefillin. So we're taught in the Kabbalah as follows, that when we put on the tefillin and we think about the greatness of God, when God sees that, he puts on his tefillin and he thinks about the greatness of the Jewish people. This is why so many nations tried to outlaw tefillin. They knew the bond that it represented. They knew just how important it was to us. And yet tefillin is still here. And millions of people put them on. As many nations throughout history tried to outlaw it and ban it, it survived. It's still here. It's our daily reminder that there's more to life than just running around in circles. That there's a purpose to life. We also say the teaching in Hasidus really is that the God gave us the Torah and expects us to study Torah day and night, nonstop. And obviously we can't. We need to earn a living. So God says, here's what you do. If you put on tefillin, I'll count it as if you prayed to me and studied my Torah day and night. That's how powerful tefillin could be. It can elevate the entire day. Right before the 6-Day War broke out that year, literally a month before, the Rebbe started a campaign. He announced it by a Lag BaOmer parade that was carried live all over the world on the audio hookup. And he asked, due to the situation in Israel, that every male in Israel over the age of bar mitzvah, especially the soldiers, put on tefillin. Literally within the day, everyone was coming all over. The tables were put up for people to go and put on tefillin, especially on the army bases. Secular Jews, religious Jews, everyone was busy getting people to put on tefillin. And the Rebbe explained that this mitzvah in particular has so much merit and it has so much power to it that it will instill fear in our enemies. Israel at the time was in a state of panic. American students were flooding back home. Parents were calling their kids, come back home, they were afraid. Parks were being designated that they will become cemeteries because of the fear of how many dead people they were going to be. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe was like the prophets of old. He was bold and he predicted miraculous victories will take place, the likes of which the world has never seen before. You can watch these talks of the Lubavitcher Rebbe that he gave before the 6-Day War broke out, predicting the great miracles that the world will see that the world has never seen. And it's going to happen, he says, if in the days leading up to, God forbid, a war, if a war was going to break out, if we would get hundreds of thousands to put on tefillin. And indeed it happened. If you ever heard of the Mitzvah tank, that's when the Mitzvah tank was created. The idea of going out just like a tank is needed for protection, the Mitzvah of tefillin was needed for protection. The 6-Day War was the splitting of the sea of our times. You know, you think about the splitting of the sea, oh, I wish I was there. Well, those of you that remember 1967 and remember the 6-Day War, that was our splitting of the sea. We saw open and reveal miracles. We experienced it. We saw it. And that connection, that those miracles happen because of the merit of the mitzvah of tefillin, tells us the power of this mitzvah. And we can bring some of that miraculous intervention from up above into our own lives, into our own families, by taking on this mitzvah. Next week, I'll just finish up briefly on tefillin. We'll move on to mezuzah. I know someone asked a question about women putting on tefillin. We'll take that question. Also on Shabbat, we don't put on tefillin. I'll answer that question. And we'll move on with mezuzah as well. So I want to wish all of you a great week. We are studying the story of Joseph. We're up to the climactic last 2 weeks of this course. So if you've missed the rest of the course, you want to join in tonight. This is the final confrontation, Judah versus Joseph, and then the ultimate reunion of Joseph and his brothers. It's an emotional story. Join me tonight, 7:30 on Zoom. If you need the link, just go to jewishacademy.com. You'll be able to get the link that way. 7:30 tonight, the last 2 weeks of the story of Joseph and his brothers. If you tune in tonight and next week, you won't have to see the Broadway play. You'll know everything that's going to happen. So have a wonderful week, everybody. Look forward to seeing you. Women, if you want to join the paint night, Monday night, 7:30, paint your own canvas, jewishacademy.com. Take care, everybody.